Hey, everybody, and welcome to episode 14 of the She Is Unleashed podcast. This is season 2. Well, it's been a couple of weeks since I have been able to record and release a podcast episode. It's been a lot of things going on with a lot of travel and just a lot going on. So I apologize for the delay in the release of this episode. But I am your host, Dr. Mirriam Knight, and I am excited to dive into today's episode because we are talking about something that every faith-driven, high-performing woman in leadership needs, and that is confidence. Y'all, when it comes to confidence, we're not just talking about any kind of confidence. We're talking about a God-given authority, walking boldly in your God-given authority. And today we're going to explore what it means to step into your power, how to build your confidence that is rooted not in your own understanding, but in who God says you are, and why it's essential that for you to walk in your purpose and fulfill your purpose, you need to develop your confidence in your God-given authority. So if you've ever struggled with doubt, imposter syndrome, or just feeling like you're not enough to do what God has called you to do, then I encourage you to stay with me through this episode, and we're going to unpack all of that and help you unlock the confidence to walk in the fullness of your authority as a daughter of the Most High. So let's go into the first component. What does it mean to be confident and to have confidence in Christ? What is confidence? So confidence isn't just about being bold, outgoing, assertive. It's not about having all the answers and knowing exactly what to do in every situation. Confidence at its core is about trust, specifically trust in God's plan and God's purpose for your life. It's about knowing deep in your spirit that God has equipped you for the journey ahead and that his power is at work within you. See, I used to think that confidence meant that I had to have it all together. Y'all, this need to be flawless in ministry, in leadership, in my personal life, that I had to put on a persona, that I had to put on this mask and this image of having it all together. For the longest time, I believed that if I didn't show up perfectly, then I didn't deserve to lead, to speak, to pursue what God had called me to. But here's what I've learned over the years. Real confidence doesn't come from me having it all figured out. It comes from me knowing that he has it all figured out and I can trust him every step of the way. Let's be honest, most of the time I have no clue what I'm doing. But I can trust in his direction. I can trust in him showing me one step at a time and walking in obedience one step at a time, knowing that he's got my back when I am being obedient to him. See, one of my favorite verses about confidence is found in Jeremiah 17, verse 17, and it says, "But blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him." Our confidence isn't in our own abilities, but in God's faithfulness. When we shift our confidence from ourselves to him, that's when we begin to walk boldly and with assurance in our calling. Let me ask you, sis, where have you been placing your confidence? Is it in your own abilities, your own plans, and your own strength? Or is your confidence grounded in who God is and what he's already done for you? I want you to take a moment right here, if you can hit pause on the podcast, if you're listening to it or watching it on YouTube, take a moment to reflect on where your confidence comes from. See, here's the thing. When we don't have confidence in God and what God's put on the inside of us and God's ability to perfect everything that concerns us, we get caught in this rat race where we're constantly striving and trying to get all the knowledge, all the abilities, and we're trying to do it all ourselves because we feel like if we are lacking in any form or manner, that is an indication that we are inadequate. And this leads us into our next component. How do we overcome the self-doubt and the imposter syndrome? For some of us, maybe you're like me, where it's one degree after the other, one course after the other. You always feel like there's something that you need to learn and do, that you don't have what it takes to succeed in one area or another of your career, of your business, of your ministry, even in family. Last night, my husband and I, actually this morning, we were watching an episode of a show, and the father was talking to the daughter about she was just saying how she felt inadequate as a mother. And y'all, I felt that so many times where I have no clue what I'm doing. Like I just got thrown in the deep end. And the father was saying to her, you're doing the best that you can, the best you know how to. And just recognizing that sometimes this is just normal behavior and we don't have to respond so reactively to things because we're afraid that we're not good enough. But we can trust that in the situations, we can lean into God's wisdom, we can lean into God's strength, we can lean into His ability when we know, we recognize, and we acknowledge that we don't have it all together. We need Him. So let's talk about this big obstacle that we high performing faith driven women often have: self-doubt, right? So many women in leadership, especially high performing women, experience imposter syndrome that creeps in and tells us that we're not qualified, that we don't belong, or that someone else could do a job better. And here's the thing, it's not just in our professional spaces or our ministry spaces, it can even be in our ministries, in our personal spaces, like in our families, in our marriages, in our roles as mothers and fathers. We can struggle to feel like we don't qualify to be this. We don't belong here, that someone else could possibly do a better job. Now, I'll be completely 100% transparent. There's so many moments when I question my ability to do the things that I am in place to do right now. And I have to constantly be reminding myself that God chose me, that God placed me in this space because He saw something in me that I may not always see myself, but He saw something good in me. And that's why He's entrusted me with what He's placed before me. How many times have you been in a room or in a position where you have thought, what am I even doing here? Who do I think I am? I feel that way a lot of the times. I told you all this is going to be a 100% transparent podcast. But I've battled that imposter syndrome more times than I care to admit. I've experienced it as a mother so many times, as a wife so many times, as a sister, as a daughter, just in my personal life. We're not even going into the professional spheres, And sometimes I was sharing this at church yesterday, that the enemy can keep us so locked into the space of shame and guilt and intimidation, where we're so focused on our inadequacies. And I was saying this to the people yesterday, like, if he can keep us locked into this space where we feel like we're a personal failure, he can prevent us from even stepping into the spaces of leadership, into the spaces of influence and impact that God is calling us to. Because if I can't conquer the demons and the giants in my own personal life, how do I even think that I can conquer the big giants and the big things out there? So here's the thing, I can do all things. I can deal with my inadequacies and my adequacies. I can deal with my imperfections and the areas in which I'm strong. God can use all of that if I lean into Him and His strength and His ability, and recognize that through Him, by His power, by His Spirit, I can overcome myself and my inadequacies, and recognize that He has placed me here for a reason. He trusts me even when I don't trust myself. He sees something good and a value in me and in you, even when we can't. There's so many times when I would look around at other women who seem to have it all together, mothers, daughters, sisters, wives, and think, if they knew the real me, if they knew how nervous I actually am, or how many mistakes I've made, they never think I belonged here at this table. That's why I'm so passionate about creating a table for people that don't feel like they have a place in other places. They don't have a place at other tables. Here's the thing, the truth is, imposter syndrome is nothing more than a lie designed to keep us from stepping into our authority. God placed you exactly where you are for a reason, and God does not make mistakes. I often turn to 2 Corinthians 3, verse 5 when I feel self-doubt creeping in. Not that we are competent in ourselves to claim anything for ourselves, but our competence comes from God. I want you to hear that statement. Our competence comes from God. This verse reminds me that my qualifications don't come from me. They come from God. And if God has called me to something, He has already equipped me for it. Sis, your competence, your ability, your calling, it all comes from Him. You belong exactly where He has placed you. Now, I want to encourage you to take a moment right here. Where in your life has self-doubt been holding you back? I want you to take a moment and write it down and remind yourself that if God called you to it, He has equipped you for it. I'm going to say that again. If God called you to it, He has equipped you for it. Imposter syndrome doesn't have to have the final say. God does. So let's talk about the third component, stepping into your God-given authority. Confidence isn't just about believing in yourself. It's about stepping into the authority that God has given you. As a daughter of the King, you carry a divine authority that comes not from your title, your accomplishments, or your position, but from your identity in Christ. When you recognize that authority, it changes everything. I used to be afraid, y'all, to own my own authority. I thought that being humble meant shrinking back, playing small, and waiting for someone else to tell me I was ready. But God began to show me that humility isn't about diminishing yourself. It's about recognizing that the authority you carry comes from Him. When I started to embrace that, everything shifted. I stopped waiting for permission to lead and began walking boldly in the calling God had placed on my life. Luke 10, verse 19 says, I have given you authority to trample on snakes and scorpions and to overcome all the power of the enemy. Nothing will harm you. Jesus didn't just save us to sit on the sidelines. He gave us authority over fear, authority over doubt, authority over the enemy's schemes. And when you walk in that authority, nothing can stop you from fulfilling your purpose. See, the strategy of the enemy is to make us afraid and intimidated, to cause us to question and doubt who we truly are. But God is calling us to step up into a place where we own who we are and we step in our God-given authority and with confidence and boldness because we understand that it comes from Him. So here's 3 strategies to practically walk in your authority. Number 1, own your calling. Stop waiting for permission to step into what God has called you to do. If He has placed a vision in your heart, trust that He will give you the authority and the resources to make it happen. Number 2, declare God's promises. Speak the truth of God's word over your life daily. When you feel doubt creeping in, declare, I am more than a conqueror, according to Romans 8, verse 37. Or God has not given me a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. 2 Timothy 1, verse 7. And number 3, take action. Confidence grows when we take action. Don't wait until you feel 100% ready or qualified. Step out in faith and trust that God will meet you there. So take a moment right now and think about it. Where in your life do you need to start stepping into your God-given authority? Whether it's in your career, ministry, or personal relationships, take one step this week to own the authority that God has already given you. Now, finally, how do we walk boldly in our purpose? When you begin to walk in your God-given authority, something shifts. You start to show up differently in every area of your life. You stop playing small, you stop doubting yourself, and you begin to walk boldly in the purpose that God has placed on your life. And here's the thing, when you walk boldly in your purpose, you inspire others to do the same. You become a light, a beacon, showing other women what it looks like to live fully in the confidence that comes from Christ. I'll never forget the moment when I finally started walking boldly in my purpose. That's not to say that it's always easy and that my fears disappeared, but I choose to trust God's promise over my feelings. And when I did, I chose in that moment to trust God's promise over my feelings. And that's specifically in working with women. Y'all, I never thought I would ever serve women. It was never my desire. But when I accepted the call of God to step into this space and this territory, I had to choose to trust His promise and His calling and His nudging over what I was feeling. There's many moments when I felt unqualified and unprepared and not the person to be speaking to women. But God said, this is where I need you to be. And when I did that, when I stepped forward in obedience, doors began to open that I never could have imagined. I realized that my confidence wasn't about how I felt. It was about trusting God's plan and showing up fully for the assignment He had given me. I was talking to a client a couple of days ago, and one of the things that she mentioned to me, something happened, and I asked her, how are you even at work right now? And one statement that she made that just stood with me, she said, the mission is still on. The mission hasn't changed. Yes, there's been a tragedy. Yes, this is hard and I've been crying all day and this sucks. But the reality is the mission still stands. The work must go on. I am still required to be on my post at my assignment. The same applies for us. Even though we may face all kinds of challenges and oppositions all around us, we are called to step boldly into the spaces, into the post that God has called us to occupy. Proverbs 28, verse 1 says, "The righteous are as bold as a lion." That's who we're called to be: bold, fearless, confident women who walk in the authority of our Creator. You are not called to shrink back, to doubt yourself, or to live in fear. You are called to be as bold as a lion, to walk with confidence in the path God has laid out for you. Sis, what bold step can you take this week to walk more fully in your purpose? Whether it's speaking up, pursuing a dream, or stepping out in faith, take that step knowing that God's authority is backing you every step of the way. I'm going to say that again. Take that step knowing that God's authority is backing you every step of the way. In closing, says confidence isn't about perfection, it's about faith. It's about trusting that God has already equipped you, empowered you, and called you for such a time as this. As you go through this week, I want to encourage you to let go of the doubts, the fears, and the imposter syndrome that has been holding you back. You are more than enough because God says you are. And when you walk boldly in your God given authority, nothing can stand in your way. This week, I challenge you to take one step that pushes you outside of your comfort zone and into the confidence that God has called you to walk in. And if today's episode resonated with you, share your journey with us using the hashtag She Is Unleashed. Let's keep encouraging each other to walk in boldness, courage, and confidence. I want to thank you for joining me on this episode of She Is Unleashed. If today's message encouraged you, please subscribe, please share, please leave a review, and share this with someone who needs to hear this truth. Remember, sis, you are called, you are equipped, and you are empowered to walk boldly in your God-given authority. Until next time, stay blessed, stay encouraged, and sis, stay unleashed.